We're on episode 43, the Mega Monthly Report on Business and Life. Now, I'm not going to carry on for an hour about my own life, telling you the ins and outs of everything going on. You can actually read my reports on the website. Instead, I'm going to teach you how I do my monthly report and why it matters. And here's a hint. If you think you are spinning your wheels in your business and life, this is an easy place to start for perspective and direction on whatever your next step could be. And the best part is that it's free. There's no hundreds of dollars you've got to shell out to a coach or a strategist to tell you their opinion. You can look at what's going on for yourself and make really educated decisions. So you can go to the show notes at fearlessandframed.com/043. This is a really cool step-by-step episode. So I've broken it all down in the show notes. So you don't got to write anything down. Just enjoy listening and I'll talk to you on the other side. Enjoy the story. Hey you're listening to the Intentional Documentary Podcast. So glad to have you. Around here, I'm gushing over the stories behind the pictures that we freaking love of our own lives. You know, the ones we hold as high value and iconic, because this is where photography meets real life. I'm your host, Marie Moss, and I believe that the best way to approach your photography is through your lens, your way. Through insightful conversations with photographers, I'll explore preserving life with your camera and using what lights you up to grow your brand. Let's get started. I hope you're cozy over there because we've got a lot of ground to cover. If this is the first time you've ever listened to the podcast, this episode here is part of an ongoing series. We started back in episode 41 with the 7 symptoms of business self-sabotage, and then episode 42, which was the last episode, the magic of metrics. Now, the good news is this isn't an ongoing storyline where you're going to be confused listening to this, but the point being, go back if you haven't listened to those at some point because it's all relevant. And then get this, we've got 2 more episodes coming that I'll tell you about at the end to round off this mini series on all things business and having a bird's eye view on what you're working on. So the backstory here is this. What do you see at the end of the year? When I get into my inbox or log onto social media, it's everybody reflecting on their past year. It's the top 9 on Instagram. It's the 17 lessons I learned in 2017 or whatever the case may be. And I've never preferred like one format over the other, but every time I see this kind of share, I feel like I want to participate. So back in December 2018, when I sat down to reflect on my own year, I seriously thought I'd blacked out. I couldn't remember very much when I was thinking like, Marie, what happened in 2018? Like it was just a blank thought. So I got there. I sat down, took a little more time. I slowed down, really thought through January and so on. But what bothered me was that I hadn't really documented the unfolding story like as a whole. I don't mean make pictures. I think we can all agree that documenting goes beyond photography. Hello, episode 37. But I mean recording the stories and the highs and the lows and the events and the milestones in the day-to-day and my own emotions and growth and lingering questions that I've had, things I've let go of, things I've gained, which all of it is just ironic because I'm a documentarian by nature, right? Well, if history repeats itself, isn't it a good idea to pay attention to all of this just enough to keep the lessons we learned fresh? I mean, that's how we can course correct or do more of what is working. But in order to get there, in order to have the ability to make that decision, you have to see it first. So luckily for me, I had been using some day-to-day tools, my camera, my madness planner, I'll tell you about all that later, that helped me fill in some of the details. And I ended up writing my own end of the year review, which I'll link to in the show notes. But basically, feeling like I'd arrived at the end of the year, like I'd missed 2018 when I was thinking about it on the spot, was so big that I committed to myself to do better. So if you've ever felt that way, that's what we're talking about here. I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes I can't even remember what happened last week. We're moving so damn fast that frequent intentional pauses to look at what's quickly becoming our history, all of that is a valuable part of self-care. So since January, I've been doing a monthly report and publishing it on Fearless in Frames journal, which again, I'll link to all of this in the show notes. And I'll admit, it takes me a few hours to do. They are insanely long, and I'm not sure if anybody else on this planet actually reads them, but that's not the point. It's not content for the site. It is for me, and it is just the space where I'm choosing to put it all in one place. It's a growing business and lifelong for me to look back at. And in turn, so what I've learned so far after doing this for 3 months is that it's helped me to process emotions. It's helped me to let some stuff go, to savor the magic in the month, and give it, like, every time it gives me direction and kind of, I guess, excitement on where to go next and what to do next, or how to be next. It's been a really cool tool to look back at what was happening, especially like how I've mentioned in the past that December was a really rough month. Actually, I don't know if I've mentioned that on here, but I know I've written about that in my newsletter and all that. But point being, now, like, it's really cool to look back and see how far I've come, or how far we've come as a family, or how far the business has come since whatever was going on a few months back. Does this sound like something that would be helpful to you, or at least worth trying? If so, and you're listening to this podcast episode as it's been published, that means we're in the middle of March and you can start now. We've got a couple weeks left of the month, so do this. Ease into this, dip your toes in, just focus on the next 2 weeks, set some simple intentions, which I'll tell you how I do that in the second half of this. So that way, at the end of the month, you can do your own report and set yourself up for a fresh start for April. And you know what I'd love for you to do even more? Publish your report on your website so that I can read it. Email it to me at marie@fearlessinframed.com, or tag me in on Instagram. There's something just so profound and beautiful and magical about reading about other people's goals and intentions and their stories with as long as you can read them and look at them without adopting what other people are doing. Like, I want to make that disclaimer out there. I don't mean that, but you can gain just so much perspective. It's like one big mirror of perspective that you might not otherwise see, because you just don't know to see that way, if you will, I guess. So I would love to see that. And I'm sure at this point, you're ready to just learn how to do this thing, right? So let's get to it. So before I get into the steps, just know that I start with reviewing what's happened in the current month, and then I set the intention. So with step 1, first, without looking at the intentions that you set for yourself for that month, just review how you're feeling in general. This is so important. Whatever comes up first, go with that. So a couple things that came up for me when I did this yesterday was, well, number 1 is that I'm fully enjoying this podcast. I really love doing this. The conversations that go on while recording, and especially before and after, that allow me to just get to know the podcast guest a little more, are so enriching to my spirit. I don't have coffee dates, which is something I used to do when I was in Michigan with just like business buddies or even just my girlfriends. And I don't know anybody here yet. Then that's not like I don't want you to feel pity on me. I haven't even put any effort into getting to know anybody really. So this is like the next best thing. It feels like just that human engagement. It makes me really grateful that I've created a business model where I get to host this podcast. The second thing that came up for me is that it is like a neon flashing sign that my kids are going to be out of school in less than 3 months for the entire summer. Now, in years past, I've had some form of childcare, and right now I've got nothing lined up. I keep looking at the camps, and I don't know. I have mixed emotions about that. I don't really want to send them to any kind of a camp. I don't want to spend the money on it. And I don't want to put them in some childcare facility for the summer. I think that just stems from the fact that the first 3 to 5 years of their lives, they were always in childcare. So I have this big goal for myself to have no work summers, but still make an income, like basically have a teacher's work schedule And the good news is that I've got a great track record from stepping away from my business and still making an income. So I know that I can do it. I did it last year, but it was just for part of the summer, not all of the summer. So the big question that's top of mind for me is, what do I need to do from now through May? So here's why step 1 matters. If we just roll over what we didn't get done, then we risk missing some big things that we need to consider and integrate into our intentions. Step 2 is to reread last month's What's on Your Heart section, if you will. I've never really labeled that, to reflect on the growth or what's derailed you since then. So last month, I wrote about how I was feeling this surge of awareness and feeling awake, and it was because I was more involved in the preservation project and just doing my own preservation project work. And so I asked myself, okay, like, am I feeling the same? What feels different? And what came up this month was that I feel a richer sense of clarity on how I serve. I even posted on Instagram how I feel like I'm exiting the photography community. And the truth is that I don't really know what community I belong to anymore. And it's all felt very isolating, yet liberating. And like, maybe I'm like making my own community. I don't know. I'm not sure why this identity definition even matters to me, but I find that it keeps coming up. I mean, no one cares what my title is or where I belong besides me. But I think what it is that I do need to better articulate who I help, like who I serve and how. And I don't feel like I've got a clear-cut answer on that yet. So I think that's part of it. So I do know what came up, which is really cool, is that I have helped several people process their grief as per the success stories that I've been receiving from the preservation project. So there's that little nugget that I've acknowledged, and I don't know what to do with that, if there's anything to do with that, but it has been something that's come up. So hopefully you can see why step 2 matters and how it's really another layer to step 1. It shows you the like what's changed, like from how you were feeling just 1 month ago. And for whatever reason, when I just asked myself, like, how am I feeling in general, that everything about like the clarity and how I serve and the identity and all of that, none of that came up until I read what I wrote last month. So hopefully that makes sense to you. And that's step 2. Step 3, now you're going to actually look at the business and life intentions you set for the past month. I'll tell you how these were set to begin with in just a little bit. So a couple things that I had in my intentions for February were write something meaningful every day and launch the 7-Day Storytellers Challenge. So as I go through this intention by intention, I'm listening to my thoughts on what comes up around each thing. So maybe a lesson or a frustration or a win. It's just important to acknowledge these things, not just check a box of, yep, got that done, or nope, I did not. So for the writing something meaningful every day, I didn't actually get that done. In the 7-Day Storytellers Challenge, I did. So I want to just share like why the writing challenge didn't happen. For example, I put it off and eventually gave up. It feels like I have to work on my podcast, do my marketing tasks. I'm hawk-eyeing everything that's going on in my business systems right now, and as well as just serving my audience, which leaves little time for writing. At least that's a story I'm telling myself. It's like I'm waiting for all those things to be done before I work on this. So what I need to do is define how I can fit writing in or let go of some of the other things. I was just reading the book Atomic Habits, and what James Clear, the author, was saying in there was that when we want to start a new habit, it makes a big difference to actually like call out like and define like when and how it's going to happen. So instead of just saying, well, I want to write every day, like I need to say something more specific, like I need to get up and write, or maybe it's right after I eat lunch, I'm going to take 30 minutes to write or something like that. So point being, that's just like, it's not just checking a box of did I do this or did I not? It's like really taking a deeper look. And here's a hint for you. Check in with this step weekly. It is a huge time saver for your actual report at the end of the month. I fell off the writing challenge wagon, like I said, and reflected on that in a short note on February 15th. So why I started doing this was because I noticed at the end of January that the reflection time took a long time at the month's end in terms of summing up like what happened and what came up, when I knew like I was doing it in real time too. So what I did was I printed, when I finished February's, like the top of February report where I reflected on January and set February's intentions, I printed out what was published on the website. And that has been way faster because I'm checking in with those intentions weekly to just kind of monitor their progress. And whatever's coming up, I can jot it down there as opposed to jotting it down at the end of the month when the fact is that you'd be doing it twice at that time, if that makes sense. So you want to just have a space to put your thoughts in real time. So again, you can read all of my intentions on the Fearless and Framed journal. And my favorite thing that came up from this past month's intentions is that one of the intentions that I had set was to test drive themed work days. This is something I used to do in a past business and early in my Fearless and Framed business, but I got away from it when I started making programs and such because they took more time. So as soon as I started doing these bigger projects, it was like I fell away from showing up in my business with these themed work days. And I wanted to try to get back to that. It was a slow start, but I'm feeling really good about it at the end of the month. And so now at the end of the month, I know Mondays are for all my admin stuff. Tuesdays are when I work on the podcast. Wednesdays are for content creation or program development. Thursdays are all things marketing. And then Friday is a bit of a wild card or really going deep into the systems I've created inside of my business. Now, of course, there's always room for flexibility, but I try to stick with this schedule because that way nothing gets too far out of sight. So now at the end of the month, I'm really loving how this is feeling so far. So that's step 3, is just to take a look at what you did set as intentions for yourself, what happened, why, and just kind of put them all together into this one place where you can look at everything in a little collection for yourself. That is for now, but then also for 3 or 6 months from now, if you want to look back on what's been going on, it's all there. This week's episode is brought to you by the 7-Day Storytellers Challenge. It is back. It's something that I wrote back in 2015, but it's been updated, and I'm so excited to invite you to this free event. So what is it? You're probably wondering. Inside the challenge, you will document one tiny story in your life and leverage it. You'll actually use it during the challenge to nourish your soul, your relationships, and even your business, all in just 7 days. This is a free event happening right now, and you can get in by visiting fearlessandframed.com/challenge. Here's a little tease of our agenda inside the challenge. On day 1, you'll uncover a tiny story. Now, I've got a hunch you'll probably uncover lots of tiny stories, but you'll pick one. So then on day 2, we can see the foundation of that story, and you'll look at all the details that make up that story. On day 3, you'll make one picture or lots. On day 4, you'll tell the story. On day 5, you will share it well, and I think this is one of my favorite days of the bunch. On day 6, you'll give through story, and day 7, you'll stay awake. Now, grab your spot right now, document an important story of your life this month, something that you may never have even noticed without the guidance of this challenge. And if you're a photographer, you might not even pick up your camera for this challenge. So if that's not intriguing, I don't know what is. Either way, get involved, get inside this thing, fearlessandframed.com/challenge. Step 4, review your small, impactful actions for the month and your wish list. So this is really the same as step 3. It's just looking at different sections. So what you'll hear is after I set my intentions for the month, I usually break them down into smaller, actionable tasks. And that's what that section is. And then I always have a fun little wish list. Like maybe it's editing a certain part of my editing backlog that's been on there for a while. Anything that I'd like to do, but I know I probably won't get done. And you just look at it all. Look at what was done, what wasn't, why, and note anything that comes up from those. Step 5, reflect on your story to pay attention to. So I'll talk about what that is once we get to setting up the next month, but just know that for February, I wanted to focus on my family story. Like, what does our life look like right now? It's been ages since I've documented any kind of day in the life with my camera, and I didn't necessarily want to do that per se, but I wanted to just acknowledge like what was going on and just the little idiosyncrasies of my kids right now and my husband and just the season that we're in, right? So did I do it? Not really. I kind of feel like I'm in a fog right now, it's just kind of odd. Like I'm so bound to work right now. And because of all the breaks that I had in the fall and over the holidays and knowing like that the summer is right around the corner, that makes it really easy to have just oversight of the stories around you. So no, I didn't really do this in the way that I wanted to. And I do plan on doing what I call a slowdown session in my preservation project playbook. If not tomorrow, then hopefully over the weekend. So hold me to it. But instead, I did work on editing my backlog of photos, and I printed 2 canvases and surprised my mother-in-law with them. I mailed them to her. So it's not that I didn't pay attention to my stories at all, but just not the one that I had set an intention for. Step 6 is reflect on impact made. I actually just added this one. It's not one I've done in previous months, but I want to start paying better attention to. And this goes in 2 ways. It's the impact that you've made on somebody else. So for that, I had a conversation with Laura last week, who was a participant in the Preservation Project. And she said the Preservation Project definitely helped me with the grief process. So that was like, I wanted to document that in some way, right? Like we're working so hard on our businesses and just in our lives. Maybe it's outside of business. Maybe you're volunteering or you help somebody at church, or you show up for a friend, or your spouse or your kids, or whatever the case may be. Any kind of proof that you have of the impact that you've made on another human being, document that. And then on the other end of that, who has made an impact on you? So Susan Ferraro, she was in episode 13. We were chatting through Instagram and she called me out for not showing up. And I've kind of been hiding in a way. Anyways, just this whole conversation that made an impact on me because it was like a wake-up call. So document that. Step 7 is our last step in the reflection side of all of this. I warned you this was a long one, right? But I hope you can see just how rich doing this process can really be. It can make a big impact on the direction that you have and about just all the lingering stuff that you could be carrying through you. It just feels amazing to sort of let it all out. So step 7, final reflections, acknowledge the details and random things that came up. So here's some ideas of things that I look at. Love bombs, which are basically like a gratitude list, stories that are on your heart, lessons you've learned, frustration points, the high and low light reel of your life, the high and low of your energy throughout the month, and your top memory of the month. So I use my Method to the Madness planner for this. Every day I write my intentions for the day, which are pretty quick. It's usually just a few things. And then at the end of the day, I always come back and record what actually happened and just anything that came up. And as I outlined this podcast episode, I tried to think of these details for the month and literally couldn't. My mind was just blank. So It is proof that little by little recording throughout the month, once you create that habit, is crucial. So that way you can pull this all together at the end of the month. Details are a powerful thing, and that's exactly what this last reflection step is about. So, okay, now what? We've done all this reflection work. There's a ton of information. What do you do with it? Step 8, decide what you want to do with all of this and get it done. Do the work. You've already had the spoiler alert and know that I put mine in writing on our website, and I do this somewhere at the very end of the month or fresh start of the new month. I mean, life happens, so it's not always going to be on the 31st or the 1st, but I try to stick as close to that as I can. But maybe that's not your thing. Maybe you don't want to put it on your website. Maybe you don't want to have this big, long report. Maybe you just want to keep yours in some kind of a journal and you just sort of let it all out and you never look at it again. Whatever you want to do, you just need to take a moment to think about that and decide and then do the work. They say there's magic in writing your goals and your feelings, so I highly recommend starting there. I wanted to create the monthly report so that I could remember the details of my life, not just the memories with my family, but all of it, the business side, how I feel, questions I have, business progress and setbacks, impact made, all of it. I chose to publish it on my website to have it just all in one place where I can go back. And yeah, it's long, and I don't know if anybody else actually reads it, but like I was saying at the beginning, it's for me more than anything else. So whatever you decide to do it. Step 9, finally, we're going to set some intentions. So I build this right into the reflection so that it's all in one place, one report, as you'll see on the website. To set my intentions, I've started with the power sheets by Cultivate What Matters. And from going through that at the end of the year, at the end of 2018, I've got these, I think there's 8 defined goals that I have for 2019. And I start there to make sure I'm making them a priority. If I just went off what I didn't get done in the last month, then those bigger things would never get tended to. And so I then collect all of the things that sort of came up in the reflection process and the things that actually didn't get done in the month prior and decide if I want to carry them over or let them go. So that's why I'm asking what's on my heart, because the new things can pop up. So all of that is included in this. It's all being considered. And a big question that I've been asking myself so far this year is, what will bring me peace? Peace is my word of the year. So maybe you have a different word. Maybe you've never done that, but that is always a factor in setting my intentions. And then I'm also looking at what events are happening this month. Are there any school breaks or appointments or fun plans or whatever the case may be? And then I break down this new intention report, if you will, or intention plan, I guess would be more accurate, into about 4 different sections. Number 1 is the monthly intention. So these are bigger things that will likely take several steps to work on, but it's the outcome, right, of what you want those small steps to look like. And then number 2 are the small and impactful actions that are going to make up those monthly intentions. And maybe it's just other smaller things in general that have come up. They don't always relate to one of those bigger intentions, but they're smaller, punchier individual tasks. And a lot of these things are what goes into my madness planner when I sit down and go, okay, what do I want to work on when I get to work tomorrow? Number 3 is my wish list. So this just gives me a little more of what's on my heart. If I didn't have anything else that I had to do or that I felt like I had to do, what would go there? So sometimes it's a should do, or something I feel like I should do, but a lot of the times it's just something that I want to do. And then it's just, I don't know, it helps me when I feel like I'm in the thick of a to-do list. Seeing that wish list there in writing helps me sometimes break away from that to-do list and just do the damn thing. You only live once. I know that's a cliche, but seeing that in writing helps me actually make sure that I weave in some of these things that I truly just want to do for no other reason than I want to do them into the mix of the month. And then the last thing is, it comes from the Preservation Project, and it's a story to pay attention to. So you'll pick a person, a story, an experience, whatever the case may be, that you're going to intentionally pay better attention to. So this is part of my monthly slowdown sessions inside of the Preservation Project that I use the Preservation Project playbook for, because I have that printed and bound. So that all goes in there, and it just helps me acknowledge just what already is and do something with that, process that, serve myself with that, and potentially serve and nourish the relationships that I have and even your business, because some of those stories can be perfect little brand story seeds that I talked about in episode 27. So I do all of that and then just add it to the bottom of my monthly report and also into my planner. Step 10, keep up with smaller targeted reports throughout the month. I know you're probably like, what? Are you serious? Like, you want me to do more than what I'm already doing? But just stick with me here for a sec. These are for whatever you're working on actively. But here's some examples of what I have been doing. So I have a finance report. It takes me no time at all, where I'm just looking at if we have any, debt on a credit card, if we have, whatever in savings, the business and personal, like I'm looking at all of our finances, what's coming up, our net worth, all of that. I just like to be on top of that. So at some point throughout the month, I pay attention to that. Then I'm always looking at the Preservation Project, since it is the program that I am most working on. I'm looking on the marketing side and also the customer experience side. And then I'm also looking at just all of my systems as a whole, which we talked about the magic of metrics in episode 42. So it's tracking all those little things that we talked about there. And then I keep them all separately. The monthly report we're mostly talking about here is more about life meets business. It's a plan. It's a review that gives me more awareness and direction. But I just want you to know with this step that it doesn't end there. These smaller reports are crucial. Step 11, check in with your intentions regularly. So I've already talked about that a little bit. The point is you want to do a little of the work that is in your intention, in your actions, and in the story that you want to pay attention to, and all of that. Do a little work, check in, do a little work, check in. I talk about this in episode 34, zoom in, zoom out, repeat, because if you go away from this list for an entire month, you're probably not going to make very much progress on these intentions that you've set for yourself. The Power Sheets planner has this thing in there called a tending list. So that is really cool because there's a progress bar inside of there that you can keep growing. So I use a mix of that and then just have my printed out report here, as opposed to just having this like planner that I'm working off of. But I take little bits of what's in my report and move it to my madness planner that I'm in every single day. So again, do a little work, check in, do a little work, check in, repeat. I like to do this weekly or as something pops up. I do what I call a Friday 15, where every Friday I look at what happened in the week, what didn't, what I want to see happen the following week, and just any thoughts and feelings that come up. And again, I'm in my madness planner every day, and I'm going to link to all of this inside of the show notes. And that is it. Can you believe it? We finally made it through. All of this reflection and planning may sound a bit rigid. As I'm recording this, and as I did my outline, I'm thinking to myself, are my listeners just going to think that I'm nuts? Are they going to actually do the work? I really hope that you at least try. Just know that I'm not against spontaneity. I'm not against inspired action. It's actually the opposite. So my strategist, Kyla Roma, has told me in the past, slow down to speed up. And that's exactly what doing this process does for me. So that when you speed up, you're more likely to be precise, to act according to your values, at least the things that you say you value. You're not just going to talk the talk, you're going to walk the walk. In that book that I was mentioning, Atomic Habits, James Clear has a chapter on the downside of creating good habits. I think it was like one of my favorite chapters in the book. And he said, the upside of habits is that we can do things without thinking. The downside of habits is that you can get used to doing things a certain way and stop paying attention to little errors. You assume you're getting better because you're getting experience. In reality, you are merely reinforcing your current habits, not improving them. Goodness, I loved that excerpt and could go in a few different directions with that. But for the sake of brevity, just know that this monthly report is really a deep look at your habits on a bigger scale. The report encompasses the results happening or not from your habits, giving you the opportunity for a closer look. So for a couple examples, in business, say you're blogging about something or you've got a certain themed Instagram post. We just started the story of the month on the podcast here, for example. Whatever it is, if you're doing something in a certain way and you're doing it regularly, what's the point of doing it if it's not producing a result? Noticing that can allow you to course correct, which might just be a simple tweak that you need to make on something, or maybe it's letting something go altogether because it's kind of a waste of time. On the personal side, what good is it if you're photographing your everyday, but the way you shoot becomes so on autopilot or influenced from outside sources that you no longer refine how you see? It's not about being a good or a stagnant photographer or whatever. That is small potatoes here. It's risking completely missing important stories in your life. And to me, that's a big deal. That is a big cost. Now, the preservation project can help guide you with your stories, of course, but it's not about that. This report that we're talking about here in episode 43 is about paying better attention to your life in business and not in business in a well-rounded way. So I've got some gut check questions. Are you ready? Number 1, are you operating on the fly or intentionally? Number 2, when does on the fly feel like a good thing and when does it cause friction? Number 3, when does being intentional about how you're showing up, how you're spending your time, how you're doing certain things feel like a good thing? And when does it cause friction? And number 4, how can you better capture the progression of your own life, your goals, and your spirit? So if you need to hear those again, visit the show notes, fearlessandframed.com/043. Next week, you'll hear the story of the month because it's about that time. And then following that, I've got 2 more episodes to round off this series. The first will be creating rich systems with LaToya Dixon-Smith to help you even more with a bird's eye view on your business and your workflows. And then I've done a real review on one photographer's online presence and her marketing message, or her marketing messaging, I should say. And I've turned her review into a podcast episode for you. So I'm really excited about this. It's the first time I've done anything like this on the podcast. And so my hope, my goal for it is that you can kind of self-evaluate what you've got going on as you hear that episode as well. So there's so many exciting things happening ahead. And after those, we'll talk more about the documentary side of it all in case you're missing that piece of the podcast. Until next week, email me your questions. I'd love to answer any questions on the podcast episodes from listeners like you on all things documenting, expanding awareness, using your preservation pieces to serve others, and all the things, marketing and managing stuff that we've been talking about these past few episodes. My email is marie@fearlessandframed.com. I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, have a great week.